So Democrats yesterday chose who would be House leadership. Now, we had a great progressive who was running for that position, Representative Barbara Lee. Now, Lee is very progressive. She was the sole lone vote against going to war in Iraq and Afghanistan after 9/11. So when the rest of the Democrats were like buying the Republican line of, oh, we've got to go to war, we've got to go attack Afghanistan, we've got to go attack Saddam Hussein, she said no, not because she didn't care about what had happened in 9/11. It's because she didn't want to go rushing into a war for literally no reason. That ended up turning into a complete disaster and a complete debacle. So she would have been a great leader because she showed leadership on that issue. She'd been in Congress for 30 years. She's very progressive. And not only that, but she would have been the first woman of color to be in House leadership in history. So that would have been amazing in itself. However, unfortunately, thanks to the establishment, it was not to be. She was narrowly defeated by Representative Hakeem Jeffries, who was elected on Wednesday by a vote of 123 to 113. So here the establishment said, hey, we know you're progressive. We know that you'd be a great leader. You've got years of experience under your belt. But you know what? We're not going to go in that direction. We're going to go with the centrist moderate. Now, but wait a minute. There are people out there that'll be like, Jeff, you don't understand. Hakeem Jeffries is progressive. He's totally progressive. No, he's not. He calls himself a, quote, pragmatic progressive, where have we heard that before, but says, on policy, no, I'm not interested in going progressive policy, and I'm very interested in working and reaching out with Donald Trump to avoid a government shutdown. So now let me go through why Hakeem Jeffries is not progressive, even though he is part of the Progressive Caucus in the House. Again, he's part of the Progressive Caucus in the House, but as you're going to see from these policy positions, not progressive. For one, let's start with the issue of taking money from big corporate donors. Okay. Now, that should be a litmus test, right? It's a litmus test for Justice Democrats. You have to take no corporate money. That's where Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she belongs to the Justice Democrats. You also have Ro Khanna, who also takes no corporate money. So again, that should be a pretty easy litmus test. If you don't take corporate money or money from gigantic donors, then you can call yourself a progressive. Well, and the reason that, it's not just a contrived reason, but it's basically if you take money from big donors, you are more likely to represent big donors. You are more likely to take their calls, to go into meetings with them, and more importantly, side with them on their policy issues. Big corporations generally have policy issues that keep the minimum wage the same or lower minimum wage, or basically that don't help regular constituents and regular workers, but help corporations. So that's why it should be an absolute litmus test. All right, so let's go to how much money Hakeem Jeffries has taken from small donors. Now, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she ran a campaign that was exclusively funded by small donors. Bernie Sanders, during his run, had a majority of his money donated by small donors, $27 or less. Well, what about Hakeem Jeffries? Well, it turns out he'd received quite a bit of money, but in his last election, he received just 1.3% of his total funding from small donors, which means the rest of it came from large donors or PACs, political action committees. That's not a good sign. All right, so look, strike one. Let's go to Medicare for all. Let's go more on policy, right? So look, maybe you can take corporate money or maybe you can take big donor money, but still be progressive. I know it's a silly idea, but let's entertain it for a second, right? So how does he feel about Medicare for all? Well, apparently not very fondly. He had talked about protecting the ACA. In fact, he's mend it, not end it. That's his big push. Well, now, who has used that same rhetoric when it comes to Medicare for all in a progressive, in a Democratic primary? Well, Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton said Medicare for all would basically end the ACA. Well, we can't do that. We can't take insurance away from everybody. Which, again, is a fallacy because it would basically be a gradual expansion of Medicare over the span of a few years. Well, it's actually pretty good. And then slowly phasing out private insurance. Now, a lot of Americans, over 75% of Americans and 80% of Democrats, I think it was 85% of Democrats in polls, favor a Medicare for all single-payer system. And that, of course, is referring to a Bernie Sanders-style expansion of Medicare, which includes things like dental and vision and certain drugs, etc. So it basically plugs the current holes in Medicare right now and expands it. Because right now, Medicare, thanks to George W. Bush, you've got things like Medicare Advantage and people buying supplementary private insurance. Under the Sanders plan, you wouldn't have to because it's more comprehensive. But nonetheless, this guy, no, not in favor. It's going to take away your health care right now. And I don't want to do that. I want to fix the ACA. Well, the ACA is based on a faulty premise that you can have an insurance system that is for profit and have it cover everyone and be cheaper somehow. And that's just not how it works out. Okay. But anyway, so now on his rhetoric, right? Or not necessarily his rhetoric, but yes, it is somewhat progressive, but it's also like the milk toasty kind. I don't know if that makes a whole lot of sense, but it's trying to use some of the progressive language, but not really. Like, for example, the code words about access to affordable healthcare. And, oh, I'm pragmatic. I'm a pragmatic progressive, but I'm not necessarily, the progressive. Really, I'm pragmatic, which means very small change, more status quo than anything else. I'm here to protect the status quo, right? Now, on that, The Economist had said that, quote, though he supports the principle of universal healthcare coverage, this is back on the ACA, he speaks of the importance of market forces and getting things done in a responsible fashion. Quoting Ronald Reagan approvingly, there's another strike, he suggests this means promoting a flourishing private sector outside the legitimate functions of government. Praising Ronald Reagan? Out. You're done. But also says, oh no, we need we think the market forces are important for getting things done in a responsible fashion. You know what that is? That is the status quo. So, no, he's not progressive. You can't be progressive and be in favor of this status quo, which is the ACA right now. So, that's a no on healthcare. Okay, Israel, right? Now, in Israel, prepare to be disappointed. In the 2014, during the attacks on Gaza, which took the lives of a lot of innocent Palestinians, he said, when you live in a tough neighborhood, Israel should not be made to apologize for its strength. You know why? Because the only thing that neighbors respect in a tough neighborhood is strength. I mean, the only thing the Palestinians will ever understand is strength. That's why they keep trying to go to the UN so that they can create a second state, so that they don't have to, defend themselves, or they don't have to feel like they have to attack Israel, right? They want their own state. You know who keeps shutting them down? The United States. That's what happens. So, look, that's not a progressive position supporting the occupation of Israel. Or, I'm sorry, of Palestine by Israel. Like I said, Israel right now is being run by a right-wing government that essentially continues to stay in power using fear. Fear of the Palestinians, right? And not trying to go for a two-state solution, which would actually end the violence in Gaza. So, no, not a progressive on Israel, not a progressive on Medicare for all, not a progressive on, as you're going to see, charter schools as well. He is actually in support of charter schools. You know who else is in support of charter schools? A lot of Republicans, Betsy DeVos as well. So, here we go. He's not a progressive based on both policies and record. In fact, as The Economist noted in a profile published back in September, he said, quote, Jeffries is not a member of the moderate New Democrats faction, but he often sounds as if he should be. I think that's fairly clear. He may be part of the progressive caucus, but he doesn't belong there. He doesn't belong there at all. And now, of course, let's get to how he feels about the most popular politician in the country, Bernie Sanders. Now, Hakeem Jeffries, like a lot of Democrats, ended up being a delegate for Hillary Clinton, right? So look, I'm not as critical on that part because look, there are a lot of politicians that decided, look, it's inevitable. She's probably going to win anyway, so I'm going to be a delegate for Hillary Clinton, right? I'm not going to be too tough on that because I think that a lot of these establishment Democrats had it in their head, well, that she's just inevitable and she's the one to beat Donald Trump. Now, these people didn't pay attention to polls. These people didn't pay attention to the weaknesses of Hillary Clinton. All they saw is, well, Trump is so bad and the American people will never vote for that. Well, we all learned from that mistake. But anyway, while the primary was going on between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, he decided that he would go in and attack Bernie Sanders as, quote, a gun-loving socialist with zero foreign policy experience. And he has been very critical of Bernie Sanders ever since. So, progressive, no. Not so much at all. Look, House Democrats had a chance to replace Joe Crowley. Joe Crowley was one of the biggest fundraisers in the House, right? He was a guy that always was there for the corporations, and the corporations were always there for him. They had a chance to replace him. And the reason, of course, Joe Crowley lost is because lost against the progressive. Somebody who was on the issues that were deeply popular. Things like Medicare for all, eliminating student loan debt, affordable college, a higher minimum wage, a living wage. She crushed him. And so, look, he's gone, and the Democrats had a chance to replace Crowley with someone who was progressive, to show that the Democrats wanted to go in a more progressive direction. But did they do that? No. They instead chose another big money moderate. So much for changing the Democratic leadership in the House. And of course, progressives, well, we're all insanely pissed. In fact, I'm going to read you some quote here. It's from Zach Carter from the Huffington Post. He said, Jeffries is a big money Democrat and a member in good standing of Andrew Cuomo's New York machine. There's no way to spin this victory over Barbara Lee as a sign the party is moving in a progressive direction. That's because they're not. Not only that, but guess who's going to be Speaker? Nancy Pelosi. No change, just more status quo. It's not good going into 2020. That means the same old Democrats and the same old Democratic way of doing things in the Democratic Party is going to be on display in 2020. That's not a good thing. Now, Margaret McLaughlin, a member of the Metro D.C. branch of the Democratic Socialists of America, said, quote, what is there to say anymore? The Democratic Party establishment needs to be primaried into oblivion. I love that. And I agree with that wholeheartedly because that's what we're trying to do. And unfortunately, we just didn't have enough progressives in office this time to stop Pelosi from being leader and to elevate someone like Barbara Lee. Nonetheless, it came pretty close. Now, one more quote here. This is from Ro Khanna, who's a representative who is a progressive. He said, our caucus today denied Barbara Lee the honor she deserved of being chair. But the petty politics of members of Congress will never be able to deny her her place in history. She towers above those who rejected her. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/tytnation, set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know how I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/tytnation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent progressive media.